I'm Jo Case from Kill Your Darlings, and I'm here with Monica Dux, who has written a lead essay in issue 2, which is Temple of the Female Eunuch. And we're about to do an event talking about her essay with Karen Pickering and Leslie Cannell. And I'm just going to ask Monica a few little questions for readings about her essay and about 40 years of the female eunuch. Thank you for joining us in Readings.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Monica, what attracted you to the idea of writing about the female eunuch?
I love Greer. I think everyone loves Greer.
Yeah.
It's kind of a love-hate relationship for a lot of women, but I don't have much hate for her. I do, when she annoys me, when she said things that I go, I don't agree, I still see that as part of the magic. So, yeah, I really wanted to explore because of that. Also, Nowra, who I don't love, but I respect a little bit, but his article I thought was very unfair, so I thought it'd be good to go with that.
So you had some thoughts in the back of your head about that?
Yeah, and it was interesting actually, the response to the Nowra essay, the way that feminists all kind of got together and said this is wrong, and I thought that was really interesting moment. So.
And like you said in your essay, even in the quadrant, they were defending Greer.
Yeah, everyone came out, and people who would normally, be at each other or something going, leave her alone, and I thought, what's that about? All suddenly on the Greer train, where so often, we're all quite polarised about her.
You say that many 30-something feminists who you've met are embarrassed to admit that they haven't read the book and say things like, oh, I was always planning to get to it. I won't say that I was in that camp. Go on. What is it about the book you think that gets that kind of response? Why is it a book that was published 40 years ago women think that they should have read it?
Well, it was such an amazing book. It changed so many lives. I think a lot of women, our generation and younger, they would hear their mothers and their grandmothers saying, this is the book that changed me. And Greer herself and the Female Eunuch have become so iconic that it's one of those books. If you identify as a feminist, you often think, oh, I really should read the Female Eunuch. And also, it's the one that gets mentioned all the time. Like, ask someone to name a feminist, they name Germaine Greer. Ask them to name a feminist book, oh, the Female Eunuch. So naturally, I think you have this sudden sense, I really should read that.
Absolutely. And when did you first read it?
I came across it in my 20s. I read it throughout my 20s in various stages.
So not all in one sitting?
No, I don't actually remember. I mean, it was like I've got a few feminist books where you go, oh, I really remember that moment. But I didn't really with the Female Eunuch. And I think it was my age. It didn't really... I was so immersed in kind of heavy and labour compass and feminist theory that it seemed like such a book on the outer of what I was studying, and now in retrospect I look back and it's funny, I wish I sat down and really embraced it because I think it's a much more relevant book than a lot of other texts I've been engaged in.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think it's more relevant than...
I just think it's that the spirit that she brings to it, and I think that's the magic of it. It's her language is fantastic. And I think that's one of the best lessons of it. You read it and you go, yeah, I can get really angry and do it with style. There's something very stylish about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message for women who often feel very, we have to apologise and we find it very hard to articulate our anger. And she just did it, like that. So.
What do you think the essential message of the Female Eunuch is, and how do you think it stands up today?
Look, the most seductive thing in the book, and I think this is what still stands up today, is this idea of you have to look within and find your own liberation. I mean, she was saying, how can women liberate as a group if they can't find it in themselves? And I think, in some ways that seems quite negative, people saying, oh, is this some kind of Oprah-esque, Oprah Winfrey, look into yourselves. But I don't think that's what she was saying. I think women read it very much as I'm angry and I can feel angry and there are reasons. I don't have to imagine myself like this. I don't have to imagine being a woman like this. And I think Greer really opened the curtains for women in that way.
Absolutely. And when she's drawing on the personal, and she's looking at her own life, but also very personal details that a lot of women will identify with, I suppose, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's still very relevant. I mean, even chapters on the vagina and all the different ways that you read it, and it's really funny. And there's a lot in there that you go, oh, this is dated, but I think that basic idea of you can imagine yourself differently is still so relevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In your Kill Your Darlings essay, you talk about Louis Nowra and what you call the parsnip school of criticism. Can you explain what that is and what angered you about it?
It was the jurist Roddy Marr. he wrote an essay in Quadrant a few years ago on Greer, where he started basically saying how old and ugly she was, and it went on for a couple of paragraphs. It was quite funny. It seemed very satirical. I was thinking, is he serious? Particularly when I Google imaged him, and I thought, Roderick, look in the mirror. But
You said he'd been hit by the ugly stick.
he'd been fierce thrashing, and which is fine. Like.
If you're not throwing stones.
Exactly, and he'd known her when he was young, and it was this incredulity of why has she aged, and he referred to her as a shriveled old parsnip. And I think Louis Nowra was doing something very similar, and that's what I found quite curious. Why are they so upset that she aged? And I think it says a lot about the way that Greer wasn't meant to have aged. She should have stayed quiet. She should have gone away. And all those same men loved her in the 70s, and now that she's still here in their face, it makes them very uncomfortable.
And it's interesting what you say in the essay, that that's not just the standard thing about beautiful women ageing, but also something about celebrity culture, that we don't like it when young photogenic idols have...
No, our heroes aren't meant to. I mean, even on you look at Gallipoli legends, the young soldier, rock stars aren't meant to age, and I think Greer has fallen into that phenomena, but she's aged so well and assisted so well that it's created this kind of confusion, and hence the parsnip still records.
And one last question. If you were asked to recommend a handful of books to young women today who were wanting to get a feel for feminism and what it's about, what would you recommend?
That's a hard question. Emily Maguire's Princess Pawn Stars, I think for Australian women, young women, it's a really good entry into feminism. I really like Natasha Walter's Living Dolls, because I hate the vilification of culture. And I think that's an issue that really needs a lot more said about it.
Absolutely. And both of those are really accessible books as well. It's really intelligent.
Yeah, and they branch out quite beautifully so that you can actually seek out other... I mean, I don't think you have to agree with all that's said in these books. And The Beauty Myth, although that's not a favourite of mine, I think that's a really nice starting point for teenage girls. I think that's a book that teenage girls often go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. So I think they would be the three. And The Female Eunuch.
Excellent recommendations.
Oh, and my own. Yeah, the great film.
Of course.
I would recommend that first and foremost.